Someday I'm going to write a book about like all of the injuries that I've had and all the times I was told I'd never run again. Trust me, you can get through it. It just takes one good day to just turn everything around and just keep holding out for that day.
This is Running for Real, the podcast for runners who know that for every runner's high, there are just as many lows. All those just missed PRs, easy runs that feel hard, injury blues, and more. Each week, we'll talk to running, health, and wellness experts about their highs, lows, and best advice to build our confidence. Running for Real is about being honest, being brave, and most of all, not feeling alone. And now here's our host, who loves Christmas music, Tina Muir.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 50 of the Running for Real podcast. What a celebration. 50 episodes. This is really exciting. Only 2 more away from being a year old. So thank you so much for being here right now, whether this is your first time listening to Running for Real or whether this is your 50th time listening to Running for Real. I am so thankful that you join me and hopefully you continue to listen in the future. So last week we had Andrew Jones, who's possibly the most reputable physiologist, at least in the running world, being the key guy who was working with Nike on the sub 2 project, to break 2 in the marathon. And he's also helped Paula Radcliffe in the peak of her training, trying to figure out what was going on. And he did figure out what was going on, and look what she managed to do. If you love the science, you will love that one, so make sure you go back to check it out. Now, today is a very special one for the 50th episode, being the 10,000 meter silver medalist in the 2007 World Championships. She also ran in the 2008 and the 2012 Olympics. That is Kara Goucher, definitely my role model. You may hear me girl crushing just a little bit with her, but she was so much better than I expected. I knew she was a great girl. I knew she was someone who was really raw and honest and vulnerable, but you are going to see she takes it even higher of a level than I thought she would. And I know you're going to love this one. So after a quick word from the wonderful UCAN and the always loyal, wonderful Body Health, we will be right to the interview. Are you ready for this episode? Kara has lots of nuggets of wisdom, real moments, and honesty coming your way very soon. But I wouldn't be here right now without the wonderful support of the sponsors helping me with my dream of setting up Running for Real. One of those sponsors who helped me achieve my running dreams was Generation UCAN. So I want to thank them for supporting this podcast and fueling me and many others towards reaching our dreams. Find out more at generationucan.com/running for real. New year, new you. Well, kind of. By now, most of us know that big New Year's resolutions really don't stick most of the time. But small ones that we can actually stick to, they will make a heck of a difference. Just like adding Body Health Perfect Amino to your routine made a big difference for me, and it could to you too. Kara, thank you so much for being here today on the Running for Real podcast. You are someone I have really wanted on here for a while now, someone I've looked up to, and actually I haven't told you this, but actually whenever I get asked who my role model is, I do always say you. So I am so happy that you are here right now. Thanks for joining me.
No, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, no, this is going to be good. And I just mentioned there that you are kind of one of my running role models, particularly as I move into motherhood. So, proof that you can come back and do well afterwards. But have you always been someone, you've always been kind of someone who speaks their mind, who kind of says what's right, works hard, do what you need to do. Have you always been that way ever since you were a kid? Or was there a certain point in your life that you kind of realized that competitive spirit combined with kind of the passion that you have?
Yeah, I have always been really shy. I think that would surprise most people. I'm actually pretty shy. And as a child, especially when I was younger, I was super shy. And even if I disagreed with something, I would never say that, I would just be quiet. But I have always felt really strongly about what I feel is wrong or right. But I wouldn't necessarily speak my mind or anything like that before.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that's good to know. And yeah, that is interesting actually as well, because I don't think anyone would really expect that unless they obviously know you. There's another thing that is pivotal from maybe your childhood, being that your father was killed by a drunk driver, and how much of being a tough person and kind of appreciating each opportunity you get, do you think that plays in kind of the way you have grown, the fact that you had to kind of deal with that at such a young age?
Yeah, I think it made me a little bit, maybe like a little bit thicker skin. My mom is a very loving person, but she was always, it wasn't something we ever really dwelled on.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, that was part of our life. And we still had a really good life. And there were people with much worse circumstances than us. And so it wasn't like this, it was never allowed to be a crutch in my life at all. So I do think it made me stronger. I do think it also made me appreciate relationships, especially as I get older, more and more, especially once I became a mother.
Mm-hmm.
I think losing my father at such a young age just makes me more appreciative of all the people I have in my life and the time I have with the people that I really care about.
Yeah, no, that's great. And something that definitely kind of shows through with the way that you kind of live your life and the way that you kind of act just in general day-to-day life. And you mentioned about, Colt really kind of changing things. That was one of the big things I kind of wanted to discuss today, was about, how you did accomplish a lot before you were able to or did decide to start a family. But then after that, you kind of refused to let like motherhood be what ended your running career. And I think you were kind of one of the pivotal players, maybe alongside Paula Radcliffe, who kind of showed that it doesn't have to be a case of, you become a mother and then you never run again, or you only run local 5Ks again. What was it that encouraged you to kind of almost go to break the mold when it came to that?
I mean, obviously, Paula was a great example for me of someone that was able to have a child and come back and still compete at the highest level. And, I always wanted to be a mother. It wasn't like and I never wanted to wait until my career was over. That was just not a path for me. And so but I also didn't want my career to end. So for me, it was sort of like always a mindset, like at some point I will have a baby and then I will come back and then I will be doing both. And yeah, I was surprised when I came back just how much resistance there was and how like not a lot of help there was for mothers that are trying to compete at the highest level. Mm-hmm. That was a little bit surprising, but I was like bound and determined to continue on with my career. And so, yeah, it just was like never a question that I wouldn't like come back and run at the highest level again.
Mm-hmm. And, you said there that you decided that you wanted to be a mother and you weren't going to have it be a case of, I want to do everything I could possibly ever do as a runner, maybe get to, I don't know, around 40 years old and then decide to do the kids thing. Why did you kind of decide that you didn't want to do it kind of the way that most people were, in that most people do, try and do everything they've done just in case?
Yeah. I mean, to be totally honest, maybe I would have won Boston the year that I was pregnant with Colt, or maybe I would have placed higher at some race, or, maybe I would have placed higher in London because I wouldn't be, coming back from an injury after having Colt. But my life, as much as I love running, and I love running, I'm like addicted to running. The success of it has never been what drives me. It's more of like getting what I can out of myself. And at the end of the day, you really only have to answer to yourself. Sure, it would be great to have finished higher in London or to have won a major, but those titles and those things, I wouldn't love me back. And I just wanted more in my life. And I always knew that. Like even when I was running my best in Medellin and Osaka, I was still thinking like, well, we're still going to have a baby though, mm-hmm. right? I mean, I always wanted that. So it's just kind of, I just always felt that way. And I respect everybody's decisions either way they go. But for me, it was just always that I would have the baby while I was still in my career.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so good. And obviously I've taken the same step with that. And you said about, there not being much support. Would you say that you feel like that's kind of changed since you just had Colt, or would you say it's pretty similar nowadays in terms of the companies?
Yeah, I would hope that there's some change. But for me, I was surprised at all the roadblocks along the way. I was surprised at just even the way, like I would go to a race and, people would say, yeah, and so-and-so's a father too, and I'd be like, yeah, it's not the same. I care him and he has to come with me and I'm still nursing, or, just like, you need to give me an extra plane ticket. I was surprised at the pushback because a lot of the races that I ran, like a lot of the story was like that I was a mom, but then when I needed a babysitter and my baby, there was like just a lot of resistance and especially just with my sponsor, there was a lot of resistance on it. So I was surprised by all that and disappointed, to be honest, like really disappointed, but I wasn't going to let it stop me. Like I was just disappointed. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have to be a little bit more like, there's some things I can change and some things I can't. The situation with my contract, I can't change, but the situation with this race I'm going to go run, I'm just going to demand that you like either get me an extra hotel room and plane ticket for my mom or a babysitter to come, or I'm not coming. Mm-hmm. And when you just kind of put your foot down, of course they would do the right thing, but it was a lot of like, I was surprised at how like kind of some attitude I got about it. Like another plane ticket, you know, like in the scheme of your budget, it's not that big of a deal. So yeah, I was definitely surprised by that.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see that being the case. And was any of that eased by did you ever expect the amount of support and kind of the way that other mother runners and other people kind of, you know, used you as the kind of inspiration to get back to running themselves? Was that any of the blow kind of softened by that, by people saying, you know, thanks to you, I've got back out here and run myself?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like the support I've gotten from women in general, but especially mother runners has been incredible. It's a whole different subculture of running, and it's a whole different group of people. A lot of them using running as like to keep their sanity and for mm-hmm. survival. And you know, when you're a mom, you're so close to being there. I mean, you already are a mom, but when you have your baby and then your life is just different. Before I had a child, I hated it when people said like that. Like, it's just different and you don't know till it happens. But you know what? There are some things in life that you don't know until you experience it. And this is one of those things. And mm-hmm. your priorities shift. And like, I became so much more outspoken after I had my son, and I started demanding more for myself, not demanding, but just like asking more for myself. Things that I would just kind of just take before. I was like, actually, no. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing how this little baby like gave me, you know, they joke about mom strength when you run, but it kind of gave me like self-confidence strength to actually like stand up for myself and just to like, you know, say like, I deserve to be treated like the men. So mm-hmm. that's going to happen.
And do you think any part of that is because you want kind of your baby, like you want Colt to kind of grow up in a world where, I mean, he's a boy, so I guess maybe a little bit less, but you want him to grow up in a world where he can, you know, go get what he wants. He can be treated fairly. Do you think any part of that comes into that?
Probably. I mean, Colt is going to be a white male someday, right? And so I don't want him to ever demean someone the way I've been demeaned at different times in my life. And so I want him to see like my mom did all these cool things. She brought me with her. I was important enough that I was always there, but she still was chasing everything that she wanted, and she didn't back down. That's important to me, but mm-hmm. also so he sees like that's how you need to treat people, and you need to treat people with respect and understanding and kindness, but also you don't need to let someone push you around either.
Mm-hmm. Yep, just the kind of traits you want to have in someone, and that's good that he's got, you know, both sides of things about being compassionate but also being, you know, fair and real to people. So really, really cool to hear. What about, you know, when I saw you in Louisville, and I hope you don't mind me bringing this up, you kind of said to me about like, be careful not to rush back after having a baby. Yeah. So I just was curious if you kind of, you know, when you said that to me, what was it you feel like you could have done differently, or maybe you should have changed or would have changed, if at all, about coming back to running after, you know, giving birth to Colt?
Yeah, I mean, I hate having regrets in life. I just feel like there's no point. You can't go back in time. But if I were to do it again, I ran Boston when Colt was 6 months old, and mm-hmm. On the one hand, I ran 224 and I got 5th place and my son was there. But on the other hand, I didn't really get to enjoy his infancy. I was training so hard. I like hardly remember him as an infant. And I hate that, you know, mm-hmm. and I know that that's in general, you're just so tired, but it was compounded by the fact that I was running 110 miles a week. And it kind of set me up for a ton of injuries. I had a femoral stress fracture by that track season. And then I had hip issues, which continue to this day. And I never took the time to just sort of like let my body heal. And I'm not saying you can't go out and run right away and mm-hmm. you can't train. Yeah. I just wish I had listened to myself a little bit more, because there were signs along the way that my body was was being overworked, and I ignored it because I felt like I had to come back, especially contractually and stuff. I felt like I had to come back. And if I were to do it again, I would not make any major commitments for a year. And if I felt great and I wanted to race, that's one thing, but I wouldn't like have this sword hanging over my head that in April I'm lining up with the best people in the world and I have to be ready to go.
Mm-hmm. And how much was that how much of that was brands and contracts, and how much of it was, you know, you wanting to prove to the world that just because you were a mother, it didn't mean that you weren't ever going to run well again?
I think when I first had the idea with my coach, it was more about like proving to everybody. But once again, until you're in that situation, you don't know.
Was that before you gave birth, or that was during pregnancy?
It was before I gave birth, and it seemed like this great idea. And then I started having some issues with my shoe company. And so then I really just had to race. And so I had to race anyway. I think I raced in January for the first time, but by then I had already committed to it. And so there was no turning back, you know? And so at the end of the day, I'm the one that signed the contract and agreed to do it. And I had a great time. Like, don't get me wrong. I had a great time, great memories from it, but it really did set me up to be severely injury prone, especially in my pelvic area. And if I could just recommend to any mom coming back, it's listen to your body. Do all the little things, all the little core things. I mean, your body goes through trauma to deliver a baby. And it doesn't matter how quickly you lose the weight like ligaments still have to come back together and it takes time. Yeah. And so I just wish I had gotten someone around me that knew more about that and had followed their advice a little bit more and had done more exercises and just hadn't rushed back into such heavy training right away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I can definitely see that. And that's something that actually, I don't know if it's because of you or just other people mentioning as well. That's one thing I'm determined not to do. I've said I want my first race back to be a Disney race, because then I figure if I do a Disney race, then I'll somehow hopefully make it fun rather than putting the pressure on. But no, that's great to hear. And another thing that was kind of related to the coming back, and like you said, you did run a personal best in 2011 Boston Marathon. So, you did have the great result there that kind of showed, how far you had come, how you had, bounced back. But another thing that kind of drew some attention to it at the time, or maybe it was recently you mentioned it, was about when you were coming back from pregnancy, a certain coach gave you a thyroid, or tried to give you a thyroid medication to help lose weight. Now, how did that help? How did that make you feel at the time, knowing that you were kind of being essentially told you're too fat to run fast? You need to take some of this baby weight off. How did that make you feel, being in the vulnerable position of being a mother and being sleep deprived and kind of, going through all these changes yourself of what your body had just done?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, at first I felt ashamed, like, wow, I did have a baby 5 months ago. How come I'm not lean yet? How come? But then I was angry. I was like, I had a baby, and I just ran a 68:30 half at the New York City Half Marathon. And if I'm carrying around a little extra weight, so be it. Like, I had a baby, so my initial reaction, honestly, was I was upset and I felt bad about myself.
Did you have that thought before he said it to you, or was that he said it and then you kind of started to think to yourself, oh, wow, actually I am?
I knew that I wasn't it had been mentioned quite a few times. It wasn't like it was the first time it was mentioned. Mm-hmm. But I was like nursing and I was overwhelmed and I was like, it'll come. And everyone told me it'll come. And I was having great performances. Like I said, I ran 68:30 at the New York City Half. So I was like, no, I'm not as lean as I was before I got pregnant, but I have a 5-month-old. I just ran 68:30. That's pretty darn good. I don't want to stress about it, but yeah, it made me feel really bad. It made me feel like I wasn't dedicated enough. And then talking over with my husband, that's when I started to get a little bit more angry. Like, this is crazy. Like most people with a 5-month-old aren't running 110 miles a week and aren't having pressure on how well they're going to run at Boston. Are they going to win? And no one's nitpicking them about their weight. Like, this is insane. And I'm certainly, if I have to go to Boston 5 pounds overweight, so be it. I'm not going to take some medication that I don't have a prescription for. I'm not going to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm glad you didn't. And so what would you say to anyone listening now who is maybe is a mother trying to, come back, bounce back, and their body has done this incredible thing of giving birth to a baby, but feeling that pressure of trying to get back to pre-pregnancy weight?
I feel like we focus on the weight so much. And, the year after Colt was born, when he was 5 months old, I ran 68.30. When he was 6 months old, I ran 224.53, I think. When he was 9 months old, I made the U.S. World Championship team in the 10,000. And I did not lose the weight. I was not back to my pre-pregnancy weight until the Olympic trials in 2012, which was, he was, I don't know how old he was. He was like 13 months old. No, 15 months old. And that's when I was finally back to my pre-pregnancy weight. And so we get so hung up on the weight thing. And I just want to tell people, don't put so much pressure on yourself. See the progress you're making. Like I was running great. And I was running super solidly and putting together great performances. And if I was carrying around 5 extra pounds for a year, okay. We get so obsessed with this number on a scale. Like that's when we're finally back to our old selves. But like, who cares? I just wish that people didn't put so much pressure on themselves. Like I know a lot of people get asked, like, how long did it take you to lose the weight? And it's like, a lot of athletes lose it right away. I know a lot of athletes that lose it within like a month. That was not my situation. It took me a full year before that last nagging 5 pounds came off, but I still was running awesome and I felt great and I was strong. So I just wish we didn't focus so much on weight because it's just,
and is that the case with everyone, across the board? I mean, especially in pregnancy or coming back from having a baby, but do you see that elsewhere as well? With you and I talked about this tiny bit at Louisville with just not feeling that pressure to kind of be thinner equals faster. Have you seen it in other areas as well? Like, do you feel just as strongly that anyone to run well doesn't have to focus on the number on the scale?
Oh, absolutely. I've never been super, super lean, and every coach that I've had at every stage of my life, even in high school, has told me that I needed to lose weight. And it has been a constant, mess with my mind for my entire career. And it's really frustrating, it makes me emotional, to be honest. But I would say that part of the reason I've been able to run for so long is because I was maybe a little bit bigger and I was a little bit healthier and I was injury prone. And so I also think that has kept my career longer too, because I had all this time off, but my body isn't like breaking down. I'm going to be 40 next year and my body still feels good. Just ran in the mountains today. So it's just, I think that maybe that's a reason why at 37, I almost made our Olympic marathon team, because I have been healthy as far as fueling my body. And so the weight thing drives me insane. I'm not going to sit there and say, eat whatever you want, be 30 pounds overweight. Who cares? We all know that's not the right thing. But I think that as athletes, we know when we need to buckle down. We don't need to be told all the time. And when we're constantly told, it just makes us so insecure. And we start focusing on that instead of proper rest, or the fact that we just had an awesome workout. That's what we should be focusing on, not letting our minds run over and over and over again that we're 5 pounds overweight.
So true. Thank you so much for saying that. And really, everything you're saying there is exactly what I'm constantly preaching to people. So good to hear it from you as well, to know that, that really is the best way to be, is not to kind of put your value, your self-worth on that number. And for someone listening who is saying, okay, well, that's all well and good, but, I'm sitting there on social media and I'm seeing other people and they look, surely I have to look like them. And if I want to run my fastest, I have to look like them. What would you say to someone who does struggle with kind of the feeling bad about themselves because of social media and seeing other maybe elite runners, maybe just friends who are, leaner and therefore they feel like they are fitter than they are?
Just the way someone looks doesn't tell you anything. I've gone into so many races, looked at the line and just want to go back home and eat super healthy for 3 weeks and come back. And then I end up winning. So it's and that's the other thing is when you start to compare yourself to others, the worst parts of my career have been when I was constantly comparing myself to another athlete. you can't do that. All you can do is focus on what your own journey is, and nobody's is the same. And you know what? The social media has so many good things, but one of the bad things is like, you just start to compare yourself to other people, the way they look, how happy they seem to be. And it's so damaging. What's most important is that you are making strides in your own goals. You know, if you're making progress in your training and you're making progress towards what it is that you want to achieve, then, you know, like there's only so many things you can be worried about. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying like, hey, just eat whatever, but I'm just saying like, we get so hung up on weight and how other people, how lean they are, how defined they are. Well, maybe they're healthy, maybe they're not, but that's not what makes them a good athlete. If they're a good athlete, they're a good athlete because they were born with one hell of an engine and a pump, you know, mm-hmm. And it's not because they're really, really skinny. That's not why they're good.
Yep. Thank you. That's so good to hear. One thing before we kind of get on to a bit more of a meaty topic, I wanted to ask you about just quickly. You did mention just then nearly making an Olympic team at age 37. Now finishing fourth in that Olympic trials. What are your thoughts on that? Was that hard? How hard was that to take? Or like reflecting now, do you feel like you're happy with it, or what are your thoughts around it?
It's, you know, honestly, it's kind of like an open wound. Mm-hmm. I promised my retreaters in 2016 that I would let it go and like forgive myself. So I feel like I have to a certain extent, but if I really think about it, it's hard. Mm-hmm. Like everybody else on the starting line that day, I had put so much into that effort, and I had to fight. I just feel like I had to fight through a lot just to even be there. Mm-hmm. And so it was hard to come so close. I feel like in a weird way, it would have been easier to finish 10th or 11th. And then I would be like, okay, yeah, that's good to know. I did my best and I just wasn't there. But at the same time, we sent 3 amazing women. And I mean, Amy Hastings just got the bronze at the World Championships. That's a huge deal. And Shalane just won New York, and Desi is Desi. She's like the most consistent American marathoner ever, probably. So it hurt, but I respected all 3 women that I lost to a lot. And that did help, but you know, it'll probably just always be a little hard memory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think most of us have something like that in our past that, you know, most runners can resonate with a race that could have been, and you just wonder the what if and can never really quite let it go. And looking back now, do you think there's anything you could have changed, or really where you know, that was your absolute best that you could have given? Not necessarily even just the race, but just everything, the prep and all of that.
I think the prep went great. We had a different race strategy going in. The race strategy going in was, I will go with anyone at any pace that isn't faster than 2:25. But then the weather was just so hot. Mm-hmm. And it was like 80 degrees when we started, and there was 0 shade. And so we switched our race strategy last minute, which I don't think was a mistake. My coaches said 2:29 is going to make this team. And I was like, there's no way, everyone's too talented. And they were like, if you run 2:29, you will make it. And 2:29 did make the team. Mm-hmm. The only thing I'm a little bit sad about is the last 4 miles I gave up. I was like so sad. And I was like, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe I'm getting 4th. You know, so much went into just being there on that day, and not just physical struggle, just like mental and emotional struggle to get there. And once I finished that line, it was done. You know, everything I'd worked for was just done. And those last 4 miles, I just was like putting one foot in front of the other, but with no heart behind it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it would have made a difference or not. But I do wish I would have just run those last 4 miles with a little bit more heart, and just so then, like, that was the only thing lingering in my mind afterwards. I don't feel like I made any mistakes. I don't feel like my coaches and I did anything wrong, but I did feel like I let those last 4 miles go a little bit. And I'm like, oh, if I had run 10 seconds a mile faster, what would have happened? You know?
Yep. And I think actually that's going to be so powerful for the listeners hearing you say that, because that's so often, you know, the case. And I'm sure you get this all the time, but I certainly do, of people saying, you know, I mentally gave up. I, you know, packed it in, all this kind of stuff, and thinking that at the elite level, at the top level, you're just always this powerhouse of, I can do this. I'm the strongest. I'm the best, whatever. But I think that's good to hear you say that, even in a race that big where you're finishing fourth, not like you were 158th or something, like finishing fourth, you still kind of had that mental struggle. And I think showing that vulnerability is really going to help people kind of not feel so bad about themselves as well when they do kind of, let up a little bit, because it's only human, and we've all done that before. So thank you. Thanks for being real there. Okay, so I wanted to ask you about your decision. We've kind of talked a little bit about a certain brand that may have been kind of forcing you into some decisions and things that you weren't as happy about as you could have been, choosing, and you did choose to leave Nike after 12 years. And now, you're in a wonderful sport, have great companies behind you, including, of course, Oazel, and Skechers, I guess, too, as the two big ones, who, are supporting you along the way. But when it came to that initial decision to leave Nike, was that a tough decision, or by that point were you just kind of, I'm done, I just want to get away from them?
It was a decision that my husband and I had made a couple years before, and it was just, when can we actually do it? Mm-hmm. And so the opportunity arose, and it had to be done. And that's not to say it wasn't scary. I mean, it was scary. We were leaving financial stability, and we were leaving like a community we loved and people that we cared about and relationships that we had built. But we had made that decision together a couple years prior, and yeah, the opportunity arose and we stuck with it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And, if you could go back now, do you think you would have tried to find an earlier opportunity? I'm not saying in that 2 years, but like prior to that, maybe even prior to having Colt, do you think you would have tried to step away from them earlier, or was it the financial stability at the time was just worth it for you?
I mean, so I can't remember how long my last contract was. I was able to get out of it in a kind of crazy way, and I don't actually want to get into that, but it never really crossed my mind that I would leave. Like, I was super loyal to this company, and I signed with them out of college, and they saw me through some really bad years right after college where I was injured. And it had never really crossed my mind that like I just thought I would be a lifer. Maybe I would work there someday. It wasn't until, my last couple of years with Oregon Project that I was like, I started to feel, just some like discontent with it. Mm-hmm. And then especially when I had Colt, which was in that same time frame. I just thought not everyone, but some of the people that I had to work with do not have the same values as me. And once again, it's funny how this little baby makes you stronger. You're just sort of like, you know what? No amount of money is worth selling my soul for this. And legally, we can't leave right now, but when we can, we will. And it was super scary. But yeah, once again, it's like amazing what this little child will do for you. You just see bigger picture, and you think, you know what, if I'm blacklisted from every race and I can't get another contract, so be it. At least I'll feel better about myself. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's so good to hear you say that, because at the end of the day, it is the most important thing. And it does make me sad whenever I see, and you can kind of tell the people that have kind of sold themselves out and just kind of saying things for the sake of saying them, just for financial or just for a reason that isn't kind of morally right. So, you have become a role model for that reason as well, for kind of standing up for what you believe in and saying that things that are wrong should be kind of spoken out about, which obviously best known for being kind of the whistleblower for the Nike Oregon Project by reporting them to the US anti-doping. And at the time when that kind of came out, I mean, you must have known that this was going to, get pretty big. But did you expect to be kind of essentially bullied in the way that you were when it did come out? I remember feeling almost quite angry, for the way that you were being treated for that. But what did you and Adam kind of prepare for that you knew that it was going to kind of, get pretty tough at times?
we had been asked to go public before, and we always said no because we just didn't know if people would believe us, what like the feedback would be. But when we decided to do the BBC and ProPublica program, we knew there would be some blowback, but no, we didn't know. No, we didn't know. And it was mostly directed at me, which I think was the hard part, because Adam is a little bit more like rough around the edges and he likes a good argument, whereas I hate to argue. And so, it was mostly focused at me. And so that was really like, we weren't expecting that. And that was hard. I mean, that even caused fights between us. I was like, why are they all picking on me?
Yeah, for sure. And especially at times, like a lot of the things that I saw were, straight after a race when you're kind of vulnerable and you're emotional from, having pushed yourself to the limit and given your all. And then that was the time people were choosing to kind of talk to you about things, which, can be tough and in situations where you're supposed to be kind of, focusing on your running and you're getting kind of talked about something else. So I could definitely see that being difficult. And for people listening now, I don't know how much you can kind of go into with this, but like, do you feel that this has kind of been buried and it's not coming up again? Or is it something that, in your opinion, this is going to keep coming back around until someone admits something that, is going to kind of finally get the truth to be shown?
Yeah. I mean, it's not like it's my life's passion to hold these people accountable, but at the same time, I'm not going to let it go. And so, I think it's one of those things that kind of like bubbles up every 6 months. There's some like new article or something. And then I have like a week of hate mail and then, whatever. Or, like after the Olympic trials, I'm so tired. I'm so emotional. I just missed the Olympic team and they asked me about it. And I'm like, I'm exhausted, like, how it is when you finish a marathon, you're like dehydrated and exhausted and you're so raw. And so it's in those moments that maybe I say things that people really don't like. And so I don't see like an end date necessarily. I think it's going to keep circling around. The investigation is not over. I know that people can't believe that, but that's true. And so until USADA reaches a conclusion or until somebody admits something, no, I think it's just going to keep coming around every few months or whenever someone runs particularly well or whatever, which I think is sad. I mean, it's not good. It's not a good cloud to be hanging over the sport. But that is just the reality. Yeah.
Well, and you also have, another part of this that makes it even more difficult for you, being that, one of your medals in 2007, your bronze medal, which is now a silver medal in the 10,000 meter. Maybe tell us a bit about thinking about that moment. It might be quite upsetting, and if that's the case, I don't want you to get upset thinking about it, but like feeling robbed of that moment, not just the money loss and the career loss that you had from that moment, but just knowing that these people are essentially all around within elite running, and kind of how did that make you feel, knowing that you'd missed out on that?
It was hard in a way I didn't expect. Like, I always remembered the World Championships in 2007 as like one of the luckiest moments of my life. The weather was terrible. A lot of the favorites faltered, and it came down to Joe Pavey and I for that medal. And I even felt like I loved her a little bit because I passed her with 200 meters to go and pumped my arms and tried to make it look good, even though I was so tired. I mean, if she had challenged me at all, I would have folded. And so that winning that medal, like, just totally changed my life in a profound way. And I always just thought of how lucky I was. I mean, it's the slowest championship 10,000 on record. So I always just thought like how lucky I was for that, to have experienced that. But learning that I could have been silver medalist, it's hard to describe. Of course, the money would have been huge. And I was renegotiating with Nike at the time. So obviously the better medal you are, the more you get paid. And appearance fees and all that stuff. So the money is huge. Obviously, it like would easily pay for Colt's education no matter where he wanted to go. So that part's frustrating, but that's not really the thing. For me, it's like, I always felt so lucky. I am so lucky. Osaka is so lucky. I am such a lucky racer. I am, instead of like, I'm one of the best in the world. And I feel like if there had been only one person between me and a world title, I would have believed in myself a little bit more. And I would have maybe risked a little bit more at different times, but I always felt like I was just so lucky. And I was grateful for that. And I still am grateful for that. But then looking back, and then it makes me rethink all these different races that I ran after Osaka. And it's just sad, like I never truly thought I could be world champion. Never. I never really truly thought that. And I think if I had gotten silver, maybe I would have, right? Now there's just one person between you and the world title. And so it's weird. It made that memory like sad and kind of painful. And I feel like I have gotten some closure on it. And I have to say, like, at least my life did change in a profound way. Like Jo Pavey, it didn't, right? She was a quote unquote, she failed, right? She didn't make it. She didn't get the medal and she had to live with that. And she didn't get even though I had financial loss, I still had financial gain from getting that medal. And she didn't have that. So then I have to remind myself of like we were talking about earlier, when I decided to leave Nike, I was in a financial position that I could actually do that. And a lot of that is because of the medal. And so if I hadn't had that success and the financial gain that came from that, I don't know that I would have been able to leave, So it's like, then I think I just have to stop being angry. But it's one of those things where you kind of start to walk down that road and think about things and think about so many athletes that are cheating. And you open up Pandora's box, it really can make you insane. And I have times where I go there and I'm meeting with certain people and we go there, but then I really have to just shut it down. And I can't obsess about it all the time because it seriously will drive me crazy.
Yeah, no, I'm not surprised. And I think, that I was actually talking to Sarah Crouch, who's a good friend of mine, a few months ago about, how every race you go to now, you find yourself kind of in this mindset where you're critical of everyone, even, every single person that's on the start line with you never really know anymore. And it's made us very kind of bitter towards one another in a way that shouldn't really be the case. And, it's just so sad. And I'm assuming with that moment, just before I kind of ask you one more thing about that moment, did you consider that bronze medal, that 10,000 meter race, one of the best races? Like when people would say to you, what was one of your greatest races? That one, whereas maybe now you wouldn't mention that because it just feels so tainted. Or was that not one of the ones you'd mention anyway?
Yeah, no, I would say like I had like probably 3 or 4 really great races. And I would say that for sure. I would say that. And now I'm kind of like, well, I don't know. It might even be higher on the list, but it's weird how, and I'm sure you've done this, like you finish a race 4 years later, people start getting banned. You know what, like what's hard for me sometimes is I look back and I don't know how good I was. And it feels like such a foolish endeavor. Like you're sacrificing so much family time, like really any other joys in life that you put aside while you're training hard. And you do that for years and years and you don't even know. Like I look back at like Beijing and London and I'm like, I don't even know how good I was. And that is really hard because you start to like, I've had times where I feel almost foolish for putting so much time, is like sacrificing like, so much.
Yeah.
Like what have I been doing with my life, And once again, that's like kind of a dark place. Then I have to kind of like move on and like, okay, well, I don't do it for 7th at the Olympics. I do it because I love it. And I do love it. And it's brought me so much joy. And I love the competing and I love seeing what I can get for myself. And I have to kind of like back step out of it. But yeah, I have had moments where I just am so sad. I'm just like, what have I been doing? Like, why did I dedicate myself to this? Like, I don't even know how good I was. Like, that's insane.
Yeah, it is. It definitely. And the thing is, this is the tough question I'm going to ask you is, no one I've spoken to has really got a solution here, but like, do you see how we are ever going to pick our sport out of this kind of hole that we've got ourselves in?
Well, I feel like testing has to change. I think, I would like to see round the clock testing. Maybe, like right now, right, you can't get tested between like 11 and 6 a.m. or whatever. So I would let's say maybe twice a year you can get tested in the middle of the night. I think that would actually pop more people because they're doing like small doses right before they go to bed. But I feel like testing could be better. I feel like it needs to be more investigative. as well, because people have learned how to circumvent the testing and they know how to manipulate the system. But I don't feel like, even our IAAF president just said, like, whistleblowers need to feel like they can talk. No one from the IAAF has ever reached out to me or USATF and said, what did you see? How did that affect you? How could we do better? No one. Mm-hmm. So it's like, until I don't feel right now like anyone in any major authoritative position truly wants to clean up the sport, because it would be such a mess. It would be such a mess. And it's sort of like, they don't even want to go there,
Yeah. Yep.
So it leaves me with little hope, but I do know that there are a lot of people who do care, and I'm not going to stop fighting the good fight. I've talked to Travis Tygart about this. I'm tired, right? Nothing's changing. I'm tired. And I think I can't do it anymore. I'm over it. I'm over it. Someone else can fight this battle. And I go to bed and I wake up the next day and I still care about it, and I'm not going to walk away from it. So it's just, I know there's a lot of people who aren't going to walk away from it, but it can feel like a never ending battle.
Mm-hmm. Which actually in some ways is kind of like running itself, in that, you might have like a string of bad races, or you might not be able to stay healthy and things just keep going wrong and you keep getting setbacks. And every time, I think it was you that actually did a post like on Instagram about, nothing has broken my heart the way that running has, but I still love it. And it's not that you love chasing after things like that, but when you're passionate about it, running does keep breaking your heart, but we keep, saying, that's it, I'm done, I'm fed up with this. But then it keeps coming back. So it is, kind of parallels it in a lot of ways.
It does, yeah.
And did you watch the documentary Icarus?
I did, yes.
Yeah, and for anyone listening who has not watched that, go watch it on Netflix. It is just, my jaw was on the floor watching it, but definitely worth a watch.
It's worth a watch. And I think like another book that's worth reading too is Tyler Hamilton's book, The Secret Race, because so many times I have people tell me, well, if they're cheating, how do they not get caught? And I mean, even my grandma has said that to me numerous times. And so I bought her Tyler's book because they talked about how they just microdosed and they were able to avoid detection. So I think that's a good book for people who just, they don't get it, and I understand why you don't get it. These people are getting drug tested, so they must be clean. But yeah, that's a great movie to watch, to really like delve into, like, it's not quite that simple.
Yes, definitely. And I will put links to both of those in the show notes. Now, one more thing I wanted to ask you about just before we kind of wrap up with the Running for Real 4 is, after you left Nike, you did end up, as I mentioned, you work with multiple companies now, Oiselle, Skechers, Zenza, Noon, Strava, Soleus. Sure, I'm missing some, but those are the ones I had. But particularly Oiselle, I did have Sally Bergeson on the show, and she was obviously, people really got to kind of see that side of what she believes and what she thinks about, and almost Skechers with the same thing, kind of coming from behind, trying to take on these big giants. What is it about the companies that you've chosen that you're working with now that really kind of makes you feel good about what you're doing? Comparatively to the companies you were working with before, or company?
Yeah, I think for me, it's about relationships. I really like when my voice matters and helping to grow brands. That's been really rewarding. But also just like good people with good values. And not to say that there weren't good people before. There were lots of really great people at the company I was with before. But the bottom line was about dollar sales and winning. And I feel like I found a good spot where, it's always going to be a business, but telling people stories and encouraging people to run is more important than if I make an Olympic team or not. Mm-hmm. And that matters to me, because I don't care how fast you are. At some point, you won't be elite anymore. That's just the reality. And so then are you just worthless? Do you have no value? No, you're still the same person. You're still the same person. And so I care about companies that care about people in the long haul and that care about every type of runner. And so I've just tried to like really align myself in opportunities like that, whether it's like things I've done with Apple, just like companies that are really just encouraging people to find the sport and to love the sport for the right reasons, and who support elites for sure, but support all aspects of them, not just performance based.
Yeah, which is so important. And I totally get what you're saying. Actually, when I decided to stop running, I I had this real crisis thinking that no one was going to want to listen to anything I said because I was no longer an elite. And so my opinion wouldn't matter because, I was just, I was a has-been essentially. And I was surprised when people kind of still kept asking me for advice and still now do and wanted to listen to this podcast and things like that. And I think that is a real struggle that many elites go through. But it's good that you've realized that, it isn't just about the running career. It's about what you can give to people in the rest of your life through, like you said, the friendships, the relationships, the what you're giving rather than just kind of the numbers next to your name say. So it's definitely come across with you that you are passionate about helping people and being kind of a role model to other people. So thank you for that. Because, I know I speak on behalf of many of the listeners in saying that, you have changed lives in a lot of ways because of that. So thank you. And one more thing I want to ask you just before we get on to these final questions is, for any listeners now who are going through a lot of setbacks, maybe, things are kind of going wrong in their family, or they keep getting injured, or, just keep having these heartbreaking situations to do with running. What would be one piece of advice you would give them to kind of hang in there and, believe in who they can be?
I just think that we all go through really, really bad times. And first of all, just know like you are not alone. I've had so many dark moments with running. Even this past year was a struggle. And so, but at the same time, running was always there for me as like a release and a way to get rid of that angst. And I know when you're injured and that's taken away, it's so hard. But it will come back. It will come back. And those people will be there for you. Like lean on your running friends during those times. Like they get it. Of all the people, like maybe your siblings are like, why are you so upset because you can't go for a 20-mile run, But they understand that it's like, oh, you don't feel alive. You don't feel like yourself. So lean on those people. And just remember, like the body is a miraculous thing. And you will get better. You will get through it. Someday I'm going to write a book about like all of the injuries that I've had and all the times I was told I'd never run again. And you trust me, you can get through it. Lean on your running friends and just believe it just takes one good day to just turn everything around and just keep holding out for that day.
Oh, absolute gold. Such good advice. Thank you so much. All right. We're just going to take a moment to thank our sponsors and then we'll be right back with the Running for Real 4. Cara talks about the importance of integrity and finding a brand you can trust to help support you with your running hopes and dreams. One company who has supported me my whole journey and is passionate about helping runners like you with this in your own hopes and dreams is Generation UCAN. They don't just create a fuel source that is not going to pound you with those sugar highs and crashes, and they don't just give you a fuel source that will not upset your stomach. Kind of hard to find sometimes, which allows you to focus on doing your best instead of worrying if you got your nutrition right, but they're genuinely doing what they can to help you, to be there for you. In training, I absolutely loved their bars, still eat them now, especially the peanut butter one. In races, through their super starch powder that is long-lasting and helps sustain you in those tough miles, especially in the longer races. And after runs, they have a protein version to help you recover faster. Generation UCAN was the only fuel I used to get through my 2:36 marathon, and I knew I had everything I needed to get to the finish line. You can get 15% off at generationucan.com/runningforreal. Earlier on in the show, I mentioned that Body Health Perfect Amino made a big difference to me, and it really did, especially at this time of year when marathon training starts and things begin to get really tough. This is always a time we feel a bit overwhelmed as the accumulation of miles starts to catch up, especially when combined with those hard, heavy training runs. I found that taking Body Health Perfect Amino made my body recover from training that much quicker, meaning I could really attack those long runs and hard sessions. But it's not just for marathoners, it can be runners of any distance. If you get sore or fatigued during training, Body Health Perfect Amino will help you recover too, and here's why. Your body absorbs 99% of the amino acids in Body Health Perfect Amino, compared with only 48% in eggs and 32% in meat or fish. I would take them immediately after a run, and as they absorb within 25 minutes, that would give me a nice amount of time to stretch, another component of staying healthy. Then you can enjoy your post-race meal. Get 10% off at bodyhealth.com using coupon code TINA10. All right, Cara, just 4 more questions for you, starting with a unique nutrition tip or something you use in your training that you absolutely love for fueling.
I am addicted to Noon, which I don't think is like a secret. I was sponsored by them for a while. I'm not anymore, but I'm still like in love with the company and in love with the product. So I think it's great. Like as athletes, we think we do hydration well, like maybe during training, but we probably don't hydrate as well as we should throughout the day. And so it is just like awesome. I am constantly drinking it. I'm actually drinking it right now.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. Definitely. We'll put links to Noon in the show notes. What about a running for real moment for you? A moment that only runners will understand?
Oh my goodness. Well, yeah, I mean, like I'm that person that uses my GPS. I remember when GPS came out, I was like, who's going to use that? That's ridiculous. But now I'm like totally addicted to mine. So I think that all of my neighbors think I'm crazy because I'll finish a run in front of my house, but maybe I'm only at 9.92 miles. Yeah. So then I have to jog back down and I come back and then I'm only at 9.98 and I have to jog down and back. And like, I'm sure that all my neighbors think I'm crazy, but if any of them are runners, they know that I'm just rounding up to hit my mileage.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a very, very common one there and one that many of us can resonate with. Although I can tell you this, my highest mileage has been 99.7. How impressive is that I let that go?
That's really impressive.
I think most of the listeners know the story of that, but I had a bit of a discussion, let's say, with my husband who I tried to go out and run the last 0.3. And he said, what's the point? And I said, well, I need to get to 100. And he said, no. But then I got paranoid. I'd like roll my ankle or something. So I had to let it go. But yeah, so I understand what you're saying, but then that still bothers me to this day. Okay. What about a high moment for you?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. I think now as I get older, it's like, it really is, I know it's cheesy, but it really is the relationships that matter. Mm-hmm. And 4 years ago, I started this women's running retreat. I didn't even know if anyone would come. And it's developed over time into this really amazing experience. And this summer was the 4th year that we did it, or this fall. And it is just such a highlight of my life, honestly. Mm-hmm. Just like bringing all these women together from different backgrounds, different ages, different body types, sizes. Everybody's different, but like we all have running in common. And it could not have come at a better time that I started these retreats because it constantly is a yearly reminder of what I really love about the sport. So it really is a huge highlight in my life.
Yeah. And probably a lot of people that go to it are people who keep reminding you that to love running for the joy of it, the simplicity of it, not the results or the sponsors or the accomplishments. It's about, what it brings to you elsewhere and the satisfaction and the peace of mind that we get from it as well. So I'm sure the people listening who have been to those retreats are just smiling so big right now. And finally, what do you tell yourself when you're standing on the start line of a race?
When I'm standing there, I just remind myself that I deserve to be there. I've had a lot of issues with self-confidence, so I'm always just reminding myself that I deserve to be there. I've done the work to be there. And then I remind myself that I'm only asking myself to do what I've proven to myself I can do in training. I've literally never stood on a starting line and been like lined up with and I have lined up with sub 220 people and been like, oh my gosh, I have to run 219. I'm like, no, I'm here to run 228. That's what I've prepared to do. And so I just remind myself that I'm just asking my body to do something I have proven over and over again in training that it can do.
Good. That's so good. And something that definitely everyone can apply to their own situation as they move forward. Finally, I ask my guests to send me a photo of them in a power pose. I'm sure you have one somewhere of you kind of standing on the start line or maybe just a few minutes before the race, kind of building your confidence. Will you send us a photo of you in a power pose for the listeners to go check out?
Yeah, definitely. For sure.
Great. Well, Cara, thank you so much. This has been so interesting and just thank you for being so real with us. Not as many elites as should are able to do that, but you've, constantly become a role model for someone who can speak out and be honest. So I appreciate that so much. And I'm sure the listeners do too.
No, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You can find links to everything Cara and I talked about in the show notes at tinamuir.com/episode 50. Yes, we are at number 50. Very excited for that. The podcast has come such a long way. And to all of you who have listened to any episodes, so that's you if it's your first time, and that is especially you if it is your 50th time, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for supporting the podcast. Now, I thought Cara was great there. Not many runners at her level are that real, but how cool is that Cara was just so raw with us, sharing a lot of the things, I think many of us understand. And no matter what level you are at, I learned a lot about her, and I definitely didn't know a lot of it, even though I'm a huge Cara fan. So it was just a great episode, hopefully all round. Now, if you did enjoy this episode and you're not already subscribed to the Running for Real podcast, please do it. It comes out every Friday and it will go directly to your podcast player. So if you're a new listener, thank you so much for checking out the show. And if you are a loyal one, you know how much I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Hope you have a great week.
Thanks for listening to the Running for Real podcast. Be sure to check out tinamuir.com for show notes and even more helpful running information.